Jacob, the worker for wives, coming up next on DC Bible Study. What's going on, everybody? Thank you so much for joining me for another DC Bible Study. I am DC, the Dangerous Crusader, or Brett, or whatever you want to call me. I don't care. What? Today we're going over Jacob, and we're continuing his story. Last week, if you remember, Jacob and Esau were twins of Isaac and Rebekah. Esau was a daddy's boy. Jacob was a mama's boy. Jacob went ahead and he tricked Esau into giving him his birthright. It's a trap. And then tricked Isaac into giving Jacob Esau's blessing. So there's going to be consequences, and you'll see it all coming down. You'll be like, man, karma is a biscuit. Biscuit. Not the other word, biscuit. But you know what I'm trying to say. So those of you that didn't see last week's DC Bible study, you want to go watch it, go ahead and watch it before you watch this. But we're going to go over who Jacob was. Blue, you're my boy! So Jacob was the second born son of Isaac and Rebekah. He's the younger brother of Esau. He stole Esau's blessing, and that's basically all you need to know.
You did it! Congratulations!
He's just a trickster. And now Jacob has the blessing and the birthright of Esau, kind of left his brother high and dry, cleaned out his bank account, kicked him off his land, all that fun stuff. He didn't really kick him out of his land. So what happened to Jacob after he tricked Isaac out of Esau's blessing? Well, Jacob fled from Isaac and Rebekah and everything he knew and went to live with his uncle Laban.
My name is Jeff.
So in Genesis chapter 29, verses 1 through 5, it says, Then Jacob continued on his journey and came to the land of the eastern peoples. There he saw a well in an open country with 3 flocks of sheep lying near it because the flocks were watered from that well. The stone over the mouth of the well was large. When all the flocks were gathered there, the shepherds would roll the stone away from the well's mouth and water the sheep. Then they would return the stone to its place over the mouth of the well. Jacob asked the shepherds, My brothers, where are you from? We're from Haran, they replied. He said to them, Do you know Laban, Nanner's grandson? Yes, we know him, they answered. And this is when Jacob meets Rachel. Now, Rachel, I don't know if she was a looker or not, but Jacob, he falls in love with her.
All you need is love.
So when Jacob was asked about Laban's health with the other shepherds, Rachel, who was a shepherd as well, comes to the well with her father's flock. So Rachel was a shepherd. And these shepherds, they're not like little boys sitting there. They have to protect these sheep from wild animals. There's lions, there's wolves, there's bears, there's all sorts of stuff. So she probably looked more like a Gina Carrero. Is it Gina Carrero? You know what I'm talking about though, right?
Alrighty then.
And I think she's beautiful, by the way. But, you know, she could fight, I'm sure. Remember, David, he would fight and kill bears with his bare hands. So you had to be, you know, ready to fight.
Nobody makes me bleed my own blood.
So in Genesis chapter 29, verses 9 through 12, it says, While he was still talking with them, Rachel came with her father's sheep, for she was a shepherd. When Jacob saw Rachel, daughter of his uncle Laban, and Laban's sheep, he went over and rolled the stone away from the mouth of the well and watered his uncle's sheep. Then Jacob kissed Rachel and began to weep aloud. He had told Rachel that he was a relative of her father and son of Rebekah. So she ran and told her father. I don't know if she ran and told her father out of fear, like, hey, this dude just kissed me on the mouth and started crying. Or she was like, oh my goodness, it's a family member. It's my cousin, that's weird too. But back then, that's just what happened. The gene pool wasn't as crowded as it is today. So that's what they would do way back then, is they'd marry first, second cousins and stuff like that. But it all feels wacky to me.
Wrong, 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 wrong. Wrong, 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 wrong.
So what does Jacob do? Jacob decides to work to marry Rachel. He wants to marry her. He fell in love with her. She must have been a great kisser. I don't know how. I don't know if they brushed their teeth back then, but she was a shepherd and they probably didn't have many bathrooms and sinks and stuff.
It's true.
It's pretty gross. But he wants to marry her. So Jacob, he falls in love with Rachel. And the uncle Laban asks what Jacob's wage should be for working on his land and taking care of his sheep. He's like, all right, you can work for me, but what's your price? I have to pay you something. And Jacob, he said, I'm in love with Rachel. And he asks for Rachel's hand in marriage in exchange for his services. And Laban agrees. He said, you know what? Yeah, we can do that. But you have to work for 7 years before I'll give my daughter in marriage. Oh! And let me just read the Bible verse to you, because I want you guys to know that when I read these Bible verses, I'm not just making stuff up. This is what it says in the Bible. So in Genesis chapter 29, verses 16 through 20, it says, Now Laban had 2 daughters. The name of the older one was Leah, and the name of the younger was Rachel. Leah had weak eyes, but Rachel had lovely figure and was beautiful. Jacob was in love with Rachel and said, I'll work for you for 7 years in return for your younger daughter, Rachel. Laban said, it's better that I give her to you than someone else and some other man. Stay here with me. So Jacob served 7 years to get Rachel, but they seemed like only a few days to him because of his love for her. Now, you know what that feels like, right? Before I married my wife, she was my girlfriend, and I was training for the military. I was going in as a rescue swimmer, and I would train so hard every day, but it didn't feel like anything at all because I was in love. I was going to marry this girl, and I knew I was going to marry this girl. So I would just be running around the track, doing push-ups, doing all this stuff, and just laughing through it because I knew, ooh, when this boot camp's over, I'm going to marry this girl once I go to boot camp. So I understand what that means. But Jacob, now he gets hoodwinked, which is amazing. I love this. Jacob gets hoodwinked. So after the 7 years, Jacob demands Rachel's hand in marriage. So he's like, hey man, it's been 7 years. Now I get to marry your daughter. In Genesis 29:21, it says, and Jacob said to Laban, give me my wife. My time is completed and I want to make love to her. That's a motivator, man. That's a motivator. It motivated me. So after a great feast, Laban, he gives Jacob Rachel's older sister, Leah. So Laban's like, bait and switch, I'm gonna hoodwink you. And the next morning, Jacob is furious and confronts Laban. Now, why was he not furious the night before? I have a theory that he was so drunk on wine that he was like, he probably couldn't see straight. He's like, yeah, there's Rachel. She's awesome. I love her. I'm gonna, sex her up. Color me bad. Ooh, I wanna sex you up. Am I right? And he's like, what am I thinking? So in Genesis 29:22-25, it says, so Laban brought together all the people of the place and gave a feast. But when evening came, he took his daughter Leah and brought her to Jacob. And Jacob made love to her, and Laban gave his servant Zilpah to his daughter as her attendant. When morning came, there was Leah. So Jacob said to Laban, what is this you have done to me? I served you for Rachel, didn't I? Why have you deceived me? Now, those of you that watched last week's, Jacob, he's a deceiver. He's a trickster. He's a hoodwinker. He's a bait and switcher. And now it's coming back to haunt him because he did what he did and he did all of his actions. But remember, actions have consequences and it always comes around. I heard this in the movie, I think Deliverance, and yeah, Deliverance, that's one movie. But in Deliverance, it says nothing stays buried forever. And I agree with that. But anyways, Laban, he backpedals. He's like, oh, I was found out. So he tells Jacob the custom is for the eldest sister to be married off first. And Laban does agree to marry Rachel off. But Laban says, all right, you know what? I messed up. I'm sorry. You can marry Rachel, but you have to work for me for 7 more years.
What? No.
So get this. After 7 years of working for Rachel, he finally gets to that 7th year mark, completes that, marries who he thinks is Rachel. And then Laban says, oh, yeah, you're right. You know what? You can have you can have Rachel for another 7 years. And if I were Jacob, I'd be furious.
This is the worst.
But Jacob agrees. So in Genesis 29:26-27, it says, Laban replied, it is not our custom here to give the younger daughter in marriage before the older one. Finish this daughter's bridal week. Then we will give you the younger one also in return for another 7 years of work. Trickster!
I like your plan, except it sucks.
So yeah, this is what Jacob gets. Actions have consequences, and he decided I guess I'll work for 14 years. So not only does he have to work 14 years to get Rachel, but he got another wife 7 years before, and I feel bad for the other wife.
Why are you crying?
I feel bad. It's like this poor thing. Her husband is like, ew, not that one. I wanted that one. What do you, get out of my bed. Hey, Laban, well, Gibbs. So Jacob had to work 14 years to get Rachel. Hoodwinked. And now it's time for a segment that I really love. It's called The Dangerous Take, and we're going to start that right about now. Studying this historical account in this stage of Jacob's life, it's easy to see the cracks that have formed since deceiving his father Isaac. As you may remember from last week's Bible study, Jacob tricked his father into giving the blessing meant for Esau to himself, clearly showing deceit and betrayal. So I can't help but to see the type of justice being done with Jacob, being tricked into putting 14 years of work into winning Rachel's hand in marriage. It makes me wonder if this crossed Jacob's mind as well as it was happening to him. Here he is, after working 7 years for Rachel's hand, only to be tricked into marrying Leah. Like he did with Isaac and Esau, the joke was now on him. But even though he was deceived and quite possibly and understandably furious about what transpired against him, he kept his eyes on the proverbial prize. Jacob knew what he wanted. He knew the value behind Rachel and decided to work another 7 years for her. Now we can take a lesson from Jacob in our lives today. We live in a dying world and it's full of deceit and evil intentions. There aren't many alive today that hadn't been tricked once or twice in our lives. Deceit isn't a stranger on our daily journey. So what do we do when we're deceived? I know my first reaction is to lash out, confront, and even become violent. But unfortunately, that doesn't fix the problem. It only seems to make it worse or even justifies the decision the trickster made. It would be wise to take a lesson from Jacob and keep our heads down and keep going. If we know the prize that we are working for and we think it's worth our time, then instead of lashing out, keep grinding. And if we do just that, the reward that we've been working for all this time will be placed right in front of us. And that's my dangerous take. And now it's time for a segment called Things to Take Away. I want you to remember these things and work on it this week. And we're going to start that segment right about now. All right, things to take away. Number one, if you're living a life of deceitfulness, don't be shocked if deceitfulness comes back to get you. Just like Jacob, he deceived his father. He cleared out Esau's bank account. He did everything wrong. He did everything deceitful with his mom's backing, but it came back. It's like a boomerang. It's kind of like a lot of people say these days, karma, which is a new age idea, but it comes back to you. And if deceitfulness comes back to you, don't be upset because you're doing it too. So it's probably best not to be deceitful, not to be a trickster. All right, things to take away. Number two, people in general will let you down. You can't control what they do. You can only control what you do. We live in a dying world. There's full of sin. There's full of deceitfulness. There's full of evil. You cannot control what other people do. You just can't. Only you can control what you do. And if you lash out, if you get violent, if you do any stuff, you are only lowering yourself to that level. You can't control what they do. You can only control what you do. And listen, I'm not preaching to you. I'm preaching to me too, because I have anger. Sometimes some people say I have an anger problem, especially when I'm on the court, when I'm competing. And I need to work on that. I need to work on controlling what I do, the actions that I take, not the actions of others, because others, that's on them, right? So control what you do. Don't worry about things that other people do because you can't control that. Things to take away. Number three, be wise in your desires. Don't spend a year of your life working for something that won't last. Make sure your end goal is worth it. There's so many people in this world, in our lives, that they're working at a dead-end job just to get the money, just to get the time, just to get in that routine and live your life. But if you're not happy with what you're doing, don't do it. Find something that's going to make you feel fulfilled at night. I'm not saying find something that's easy. And I'm not saying find something that you love and do it, because you don't want what you love to be your work. You just don't, because then you won't be a love anymore. It'll be work. But do something that's going to last, that's going to fulfill your life, it's going to make things better. This is temporary, guys. This is temporary. Don't spend your year of your life working for something that won't last. If you're working for something, make sure it's going to last. Make sure you can hang your hat at night and go to sleep and lay your head down at your pillow and feel fulfilled because you did something that was worth something. And that's all I have to say today, guys. And I thank you so much for joining me in another DC Bible study. Don't forget to like, subscribe, share this. I'm almost at 500 subscribers. I might just be over right now. I have to check, but I thank you. I couldn't do it without you. And remember, guys, be dangerous, love God, love people, love you. So Jacob was the firstborn son of Abraham. No, that's not right.